Well, thank you for being in this panel. It's very inspiring. Well, we have done, diaNEOsис, the Organization for Research and Studies, have done a study which was entrusted to my team at the University of Athens in order to assess the impacts of climate crisis to a number of productive sectors in the country. Well, we did the study without knowing about COVID, but in the course of the study, I will discuss about it a little bit later, what you see. In the course of the study, we had to cope with COVID as well. And this is because we have two different pandemics. The one is the known, the COVID-19, which has immediate results and needs immediate recovery measures. And the other one is the climate crisis, which is a pandemic in slow motion. They have different timescales, but the timescales have to be merged in order to have the best effective policies and results. And to my understanding and the feeling of the study is that the measures, at least with respect to the green sector and the energy sector, have to be for COVID-19, for the recovery, have to be the first phase of the overall plan for the adaptation to the climate crisis. And the target is 2050. This is the target with steps for 2030 and 2040. And this is a very important issue with respect to policy making, because climate crisis requires a lot of time to be ameliorated or even smoothed out in time. In the study, we did a lot of different models. We ran different models. It's a first of its kind because the resolution of the study is very high. We could get a lot of details for different parts of the country. The first result of the study is that the Mediterranean is indeed a hotspot area for climate crisis, for climate change. All impacts are enhanced, and we have seen this in the summer. It's going to be the case most probably in the future years. So we did a number of simulations with the models. First, we checked the models with respect to the credibility, because this is obvious, one of the questions raised. How do you trust a model for 2040 or 2050 if you're not sure that it's credible enough? So what you do, you run the model for a historic period where you know the data, you know the observations, and if the model performs well, then it's trustworthy to be applied for the future period. And this is the case for this study. So the first part was to deal with agriculture. What you see in this transparency is three models, three case studies, RCP, those are the studies, those are the scenario of the international community as with respect to the emissions of greenhouse gases. And what you see with dark green are the areas, the agricultural areas in the country, where there is a lot of sensitivity with respect to climate change. And with light green are the areas of the country where there's lesser sensitivity as with respect to climate change. So practically what is being said in this transparency is that you need an adaptation plan for every single part of this country which faces severe issues with respect to the agricultural production. And this is a long-term process. It needs to intersect with energy, with agricultural patterns, with water infrastructure projects, with every single element of the local society, even with job skilling or reskilling, because jobs are going to be lost even if we do the best available job with respect to adaptation. Climate crisis is more strong at the moment as with respect to the adaptation plans. In the next slide, which shows the, sorry, I should do that. In the next slide, which shows the detail of the approach, you can see the urban areas issue and the heat waves, which is indeed an issue. And going from the left to the right, we are moving to the less optimistic scenario, to the most pessimistic one. And you can see the change of the colors. The more the red the color, the more the heat waves. And this is important because urban areas host in this country 60% of the population, on the one hand. And on the other hand, they are the production side of a good number of the GDP of the country. So you need to pay attention to the urban areas in order to have the proper living conditions on the one hand, and on the other hand, to avoid energy poverty issues as with respect to the use of energy, especially in the time, I hope it doesn't gonna last, with high energy prices. The next one is about tourism. Again, we pinpointed a very specific parameter, which is the number of hot days, that is the days above 35 degrees centigrade. And you can see different parts of the country. Again, from the bottom left to the bottom right, you see the different range of impacts depending on the scenario of IPCC. And we have selected a number of touristic areas. Now, why it is important? Because tourism, as everybody knows in this room, is a major contributor to GDP production. on the one hand, and also it demonstrates the need for adaptation plans in the building and energy sector. You need to have enough energy to provide the cooling needed for the buildings for tourism. You need to have good buildings in order to have energy efficiency. Now, moving to the energy part of the study, of course, I'm going to show you very small part of the study. It could be said that this is the useless information of the day, but it's not. This is the billion tons of CO2 produced by Greece in the course of the modern history of the country. 4 billion tons of CO2. And why this is important and not useless? Because this is exactly the same amount that was saved due to the restriction measures by COVID. It was not done to reduce CO2 emissions, but due to the travel restrictions and the working restrictions and everything else, this was the reduction in the year 2020. This demonstrates how important it is to intensify the efforts to reduce CO2 emissions. Because even 1 year of restrictions managed to reduce just the share of one country. And which country? A country that has a contribution of 0.4% in the overall production of CO2 emissions. So despite this, still, we do have to do a lot of things. So one of the main findings of the study is in order to overcome the crisis, in order to overcome the need for adaptation and for the energy model, we need to underscore the need for a homegrown renewable energy sector based on four pillars. The first one is energy efficiency. Minister Skreka said about it. The second pillar is renewables. The third one is storage. And the fourth one is connections. All of these develop a better shape for the country, give security with respect to energy security, and of course gives a signal to the international world that this country is trying to ameliorate its contribution, even though the contribution is limited with respect to other countries in the region or in the world.